today in class, we're going to think about discipline in the classroom pertaining to the teacher. Now, we've talked recently about how you can be a good student. Can anybody tell me what would make a good student in the classroom? Matt?
Raise your hand before you speak.
Thank you. Perfect demonstration of that. Anybody else of what would make a good student in a classroom?
Not interrupting when other people are speaking.
Good. Anything else? Maddie?
Paying attention.
That's also very good. Okay, so we're also going to talk about think about in the past what a teacher has done in your classrooms that was good, that helped manage the classroom. Like, what made them a good teacher in class, of like managing your classmates and whatnot. Think back to your like elementary school, high school, even in college. How did your teachers manage your classrooms? Did they have like an environment and a culture where, for instance, you were expected to raise your hand, or was it an open discussion? Because I know in some classes where I've had teachers, you just kind of yelled out stuff, and so that was kind of different.
One thing a lot of my teachers did was expect us to say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir.
And that's part of like the culture of the classroom? Okay. So today we're going to do some writing up, and you guys have your colored markers. So who has blue? Okay. And if you would write your initial in the color that you have for when you have the other piece of paper, and we're going to answer these 3 questions. So, what are some different methods teachers use when managing a classroom? What are which behaviors teachers are related to affecting the classroom environment? And then what are some skills required for a teacher to manage a classroom? And you'll have 3 minutes to write as much as you can answering that question, and then we'll switch. You'll take it to the person on your right. So you have 3 minutes starting. Write your initial and your color so we know which one is yours. What part of organization? Like, what components of organization? Is it like they have the things prepared, the actual materials prepared, or is it the way they set up the classroom? Do they have like jobs for different students? That kind of stuff. Try to be as specific as possible. About how the teacher interacts with the students and how they involve every student, or as well. Just think about what makes a good teacher overall in the classroom, and how it pertains to the behavior, the skills, or the methods they use to manage the classroom. Also read over the previously written to see so you don't have any overlap and try to create something new. Yeah, sort of. Yeah. As long as it's distinct, so it's fine with write whatever, as long as you don't take up too much space, so you know it has some room there.
Wow, that's very good. I could remember the tip of the term.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Behavior, think of like what they like do personally, like build consistency, or like how they help the classroom be more effective. Like for instance, a teacher could have variety in their lessons. They can, with the behaviors of like knowing how to respond to discipline, like with disruptions in the classroom before it starts. Like that's kind of a behavior, like things they kind of knowing how to do that kind of stuff. If they're enthusiastic and try to incorporate other, make the students enthusiastic and whatnot, kind of their own personal. Give about 30 more seconds. Time. If you feel like you're not getting anything down, it's okay. We'll cover them all together and go more in depth if something isn't covered. what I want you guys to do is pass it to the right again, so you can your original color. You started out with. And read over, take a minute to read over everything that everyone wrote down and look at what you think is really good and answers the question fully. Or like kind of sum up what everyone's been saying. Have a good idea of what was said on each, how everyone answered the question? One more time? Did? Okay. Who would like to go? I'm going to ask you guys to stand in front and present your question. Who would like to go first?
I saw the news. I was like, oh.
Okay, so my question was, what are some skills required for a teacher to manage a classroom? So some of the great ideas that were brought up, patience, Noah brought up that it's really important to be patient as a teacher because you're going to have a lot of students and situations that kind of test that. Also, adaptability kind of goes along with like being able to work well with your fellow teachers and also having effective communication and just being able to not only communicate what you need, but glean from other people what they are needing from you. So I wrote organization. Just having an organized classroom, I think, makes a big difference. I know a lot of people have like an organized chaos, like they understand where everything is, and that works for them. But just keeping everything organized helps the students, I think, to maintain that same idea in their own work and like what they do. Let's see.
Any other good points that you noticed that people made? Is that it?
I think that's the biggest one.
On the next. Mine was, what are some effective methods teachers use to manage the classroom? Sean helped me out with one of them, which is, I can't remember the term for it, but it's called power teaching, in which there's different things you can use like class, or give me 5, which is something I've observed in my observations, which, let's say, give me 5, and all the students have to stop what they're doing and raise their hand up and pay attention to the teacher. It's a really cool method that you can use, especially with younger ones, to get their attention when they start wandering because it's liable to happen. Sean came up with a really cool idea that was class participation in rule development, which is where students actually get to develop the rules for their own classroom. And then when they're breaking the rules, they're breaking things that they've put ownership and responsibility into. So it gives it more worth because they made those rules, and so breaking them is a violation of what they created. And Maddie had some good points, which were consistent routines. And one of the biggest ones was follow through. So if you say there's going to be punishment, you have to follow through with that when that happens. Or when you say something good's going to happen after this, then you have to follow through with that. So it's both those. You have to follow through with what you say. Those were really the big points that I thought were really cool.
Which behaviors in teachers relate to an effective classroom environment? I thought that, I don't know about everybody else, but for me it was hard to think of behaviors, and I feel like we all thought of more like traits and like characteristics of a teacher, which I think could relate to the way they behave. So, Maddie said professionalism, and then she kind of wrote the behaviors, they're prompt, they're on task, they organize things, they're respectful. Like those are behaviors that relate to the trait of professionalism, which I thought was really, really good. And then, Noah said a few traits, kind of like outgoing and stuff like that. But then he has this believes that everyone can succeed and gets on the student's level. I think those are really good, important things because you got to understand that you got to get down. I can't teach a first grader math at a level that an 8th grader would be learning at. I have to lower myself down to their level. And then I just, the only thing I really could come up with was consistency, which kind of tied into the follow through that Maddie said, which was, that you just got to follow through with what you're saying and be consistent about it.
That's really good. A lot of you guys hit on some really good points that I was going for. Okay, so in this study that someone did, they went down for 8, excuse me, Sean, can you please sit down?
I'm trying, my chair's still
The chair was stuck. It wasn't his fault.
So 8 teacher behaviors, and they're listed up here. And I'll go through them individually because he has a lot of the points you guys made incorporated in all of these points. And some of them may not hit on, but you guys hit on different aspects of each of these points that he noticed that were the 8 teacher behaviors that kind of reflected of a good teacher and how they were able to do discipline in their classroom and even prevent disruptions and whatnot and create that culture. With itness, which is this first one, it's with itness. I guess it's a word he kind of created. It's pretty much the communication with the students and knowing what's going on in the classroom. The example he had was that the teachers had eyes in the back of their head, so they knew kind of what was going on. Also, that one thing was a really interesting point was that it had good timing with reaction to disruption, that they didn't wait too long, but they didn't wait for a minor thing to become a bigger thing. And it's kind of like with the rules and whatnot, it's there's a little thing a student was doing, they didn't wait for it to become a bigger issue later on down the road. They had a good timing of figuring out, knowing their students and whatnot.
So it's basically like classroom awareness?
Yeah, classroom awareness is with itness. The overlapping, which is the second one of the 8 he pointed out, was it deals more with that a teacher is able to deal with more than one classroom event at a time. Like for instance, if they're working on a reading group and a student comes up with to them to ask a question, they're able to work with both, or to keep the students to keep reading and then go to another group. So it's with the professionalism, they're able to, I think, they're organized and they're on task, but they can and they're able to assess both and deal with more than one classroom event at a time, which is kind of a basic thing about teaching. We have to juggle a lot of things in the classroom because there's a lot of different students and you're only one of you. Smoothness is to keep the class flowing, which also deals with a few things you guys pointed out, which I believe consistent routines, kind of keeping up with the classroom, there's a routine, and so there's a smoothness with it that the kids can have expect and keep the class flowing and organized. Momentum, it's not dealing with the way the teacher is actually speaking, but more of how the teacher doesn't slow down the lesson to overemphasize student behavior. They won't completely stop the lesson to deal with a student disruption. They'll be able to juggle both, and they won't completely they don't repeat instructions, and they won't completely slow down the lesson just for one student or overemphasizing student behavior. And then they deal with it non-fragmented groups. They deal with it in a whole, which also goes back to kind of smoothness of the class. They kind of keep it all kind of together. The 5th group is group alerting, which skills involved with the quote he said was non-reciting children into their reciting task, which kind of incorporates kids into the lesson and the suspense of when someone raises their hand of who's going to speak next, and then having students become a part of the lesson. And for instance, how I got you guys kind of stayed up here, you guys are the ones being part of the lesson, and presenting new, novel, and alluring materials during the recitation. So it's interesting, and then it has more of a group alerting that they're more engaged into the lesson. Next is accountability, which, as you guys said with the classroom rules, the teacher holds the students accountable during the lesson, and so that also dealing with the students keeping themselves accountable. The teachers hold the class accountable. This one is kind of interesting and kind of weird one to talk about. It's the valiance and challenge arousal, which is pretty much boils down to that the teacher's enthusiastic and is able to keep the students enthusiastic about and involved in the lesson, which you guys also pointed out in some of the behaviors and skills a teacher should have, that they should be enthusiastic and engaging and whatnot, and not boring, and they also should be ready for the lesson and excited to teach. And the next one is variety. That the lessons, and it's very simple, the lessons and activities involved are different from one another, so you have variety of lessons and the activities, and it's not all the same. It's not, you have like the same lesson, you can have different activities, like one in groups or individuals or different aspects of the lesson, and it's not all the same, so it kind of changes it up a little bit. And so these are the points. Is there any point you guys want me to go back over? Or is there any point that you feel that you guys really like, that you guys hit on your questions?
What did you say momentum was?
Momentum? It's more of like the teacher doesn't slow down a lesson for like a student's behavior. It's like, for instance, say Johnny is being disruptive. They don't slow, like it's always Johnny. They're able to, like, I guess the way to explain it is like they don't overemphasize, like they don't call that kid out. Like, for instance, like I know some people, like, they will stop the entire, like, whatever they're doing and call that person out, like they, like, and disrupt the entire class, versus like with some teachers, I've seen teachers, like, they kind of, like, they just say the kid's name, like, but they don't, like, stop their, like, they don't slow down their lesson, they just, like, say Johnny and, like, look at him and then keep on with their lesson. It doesn't really slow down the lesson anyway. That's one thing I've seen in observations last year, or like they, like, even now, like, the teacher will just say the name and then they're like, Logan, and just, like, give a look, but, like, be able to keep on overlapping with, like, dealing with multiple events at the same time. So those kind of momentum and overlapping kind of go hand in hand, that you keep the momentum and overlapping the different events that happen in the classroom. Any other questions? Especially the witness. There's some interesting terms of the valiance and challenge and arousal. Just remember that's being teacher being enthusiastic and helping the students be enthusiastic about the lesson. And the witness, like, they're with it, like, they have it. They're able to communicate with the students and know what's going on in the classroom and have good timing with, like, interacting and getting involved with the students and before disruption happens and whatnot. So how are you guys feeling about this? Thumbs up?